A customs dog froze mid-step, right in front of a quiet elderly man in a wheelchair. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stopped cold. Everyone thought it was a false alert, until they opened the footrest. What they found inside made seasoned officers step back in silence. Before we take you inside that exact moment, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you believe these canines catch what no human ever could. Now, let's get into it. The buzz of international arrivals echoed through Terminal D of Miami International Airport, a symphony of luggage wheels, PA announcements, and shuffling travelers. Officer Callie Navarro barely noticed anymore. After 7 years, the noise had become background, and her focus was on her partner's body language. Bolt, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois with amber eyes, moved through the crowd with purpose, nose working overtime as they patrolled together. They had just cleared a young couple when Bolt's head snapped to the left. The change was subtle, but after 4 years together, Callie knew his signals like her own heartbeat. She followed his gaze across the crowd. At the far end of the queue sat a man in a wheelchair. Mid-60s, white hair carefully combed, wire-rimmed glasses tucked into a beige sweater vest. One hand rested on a canvas bag in his lap. The other adjusted the rubber footrest of the airport-issued wheelchair. Nothing remarkable about him at all. Bolt didn't bark, didn't growl, he just stopped. One paw, mid-step, his body rigid as stone, his eyes locked on the wheelchair. Callie felt that familiar tingle at the base of her spine. Not quite adrenaline, not quite fear, the sixth sense that told her something wasn't right. "Talk to me, boy," she whispered as they approached. The man glanced up with a tired smile. "Something wrong, officer?" His voice carried a slight Midwestern lilt. "No, sir, just a routine pass-through. My partner's doing a sweep." The man looked at Bolt. "He all right? I've got some almonds. Maybe he caught a whiff." But Callie had seen Bolt alert on food before. This was different. His tail was rigid, ears slightly flattened. Not aggressive, just intensely alert. A young boy pointed. "Look, Mom, the police dog's staring at that old guy." His mother pulled him along quickly. "Sir," Callie said, "I'm going to need to ask you to step aside for a brief secondary screening. Just a precaution." The man sighed. "Of course, officer. I don't want trouble." As a TSA officer wheeled him toward screening, Callie radioed ahead. "Navarro to Bay 4. Non-combative alert on a wheelchair passenger. Possible compartment alert. Send diagnostic tools." "Copy that. Bay 4 ready," came the reply. Callie quickened her pace slightly to catch up, coming alongside the wheelchair as they moved down the corridor toward the screening rooms. The man, Walter Givens, according to the passport he'd already pulled from his breast pocket, looked up at her with watery blue eyes. "I hate to be a bother," he said, wincing slightly as the wheelchair bumped over an uneven section of flooring. "Damn sciatica. Lisbon Airport insisted I take one of these contraptions. Too proud to admit I needed it, I suppose." "Just bear with us, Mr. Givens," Callie said, deliberately using his name to establish connection. "We'll get this sorted quickly." Inside the screening room, Callie watched as 2 agents helped the man, Walter Givens, according to his ID from the wheelchair. "Been sitting too long," he explained with a grimace. "These flights, they cram you in like cattle." His ID checked out perfectly. 67, retired civil engineer from Des Moines, widowed 5 years ago. On a European tour after his friend canceled, no criminal record or red flags. Yet Bolt hadn't moved, his focus fixed on the wheelchair's footrest with disturbing intensity. "Let's go slow," Callie told Adrian, the technician approaching with a scanner. "We don't know what we're dealing with." Adrian nodded. He'd been with customs longer than Callie, had seen everything from cocaine in teddy bears to counterfeit microchips in wheelchair cushions. He approached each search with methodical caution. He crouched down, running a specialized wand beneath the footrest, watching the display for anomalies. Nothing beeped, no heat signature, no density alert. But when he tapped the composite frame with his knuckles, a hollow sound echoed back, a resonance that shouldn't have been there given the chair's construction. "Compartment?" Callie asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd heard that particular hollow sound before, during training exercises with modified containers. Has to be, Adrian confirmed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. This doesn't match standard airport wheelchair specs. He unclipped a small precision screwdriver from his utility belt and began working on an almost invisible seam beneath the rubber foot panel. The tiny screws yielded grudgingly, each one revealing an unexpected level of engineering. These weren't standard components. They were custom machined, perfectly matched to the chair's exterior to avoid detection. As the final screw came loose, something shifted inside the structure with a quiet but distinct thunk, like a weight settling after being held in tension. Adrian froze, his hand hovering over the partially opened panel. There's definitely something in here. Bolt let out a sharp exhale through his nose, rising to his feet but maintaining his position. Not charging forward but bracing, as if he expected whatever was inside to move or change. The hair along his spine had raised ever so slightly, a subtle tell that Callie recognized from their counterterrorism training exercises. With delicate precision, Adrian eased the panel fully open, revealing a narrow cavity tucked within the hollow structure of the footrest. A space no bigger than a paperback novel, but perfectly engineered to avoid detection. Nestled inside, lined with what appeared to be specialized shielding foil, was a vacuum-sealed plastic pouch. Adrian extracted it with gloved hands. The package was approximately 6 by 8 inches, compressed to less than an inch thick, sealed with professional-grade equipment that left no air bubbles. Callie studied the package without touching it. The contents weren't immediately identifiable. No white powder suggesting narcotics. No wires or circuits indicating electronics. Just what appeared to be a dense compressed stack of fabric or paper folded with meticulous precision. Wait, Adrian said, tilting the package under the bright lights. This isn't fabric. He placed it on the examination table, adjusting the lamp. Callie's stomach tightened as recognition dawned. Inside the clear wrapping were what looked like photocopied pages, documents with distinctive Cyrillic lettering, official-looking stamps, and what appeared to be technical diagrams rendered in precise detail. Diagrams that, even to her untrained eye, looked disturbingly like circuit schematics, or worse. Documents, Adrian confirmed, his voice taking on the clinical tone he reserved for serious discoveries. Blueprints, possibly, security clearance material, based on these seals. He pointed to a distinctive marking on one visible corner. This looks Russian military, or intelligence. Callie turned toward Walter, who had sunk slowly into one of the plastic chairs lining the wall. His face had drained of color, and genuine confusion clouded his features, his mouth slightly open in apparent shock. "Sir," she said, keeping her voice gentle despite the sudden race of her pulse, "did you know anything about this compartment in your wheelchair?" Walter blinked at her, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "What? No. God, no. Of course not." He gestured weakly at the chair. "I didn't even bring that thing. It's airport issued. I only took it because my leg locked up during the flight. Standing in that security line was killing me." He looked genuinely stunned, gaze darting between Callie and Adrian and the opened footrest. "Are you saying there's, what, contraband in that thing? In the chair I've been sitting in for hours?" Bolt finally broke his alert posture, padding forward to sniff more thoroughly at the opened footrest. After a moment, he retreated back to Callie's side and sat, his standard signal that the threat had been contained. Whatever had triggered his alert, he'd confirmed it was fully exposed. Callie studied Walter's face, searching for the micro-expressions she'd been trained to recognize, the slight muscle tensions around the eyes that indicated deception, the infinitesimal hesitations in speech patterns. She found none. Not the rehearsed surprise of a caught smuggler, but the authentic shock of someone who just discovered they'd been unknowingly involved in something dangerous. Adrian carefully sealed the package in an evidence bag, marking it with a specialized code that would trigger higher security protocols. "This isn't explosives or narcotics, Ustaz," he said quietly, but it's sensitive. You don't smuggle documents like this unless you're very concerned about who might be watching them cross borders. Callie nodded, her mind already cycling through the implications. Or who they were meant for. Walter shook his head slowly, one trembling hand rising to rub his temple. I swear to you, officer, I had no idea. I didn't pack anything in that chair. I barely even wanted the damn thing. Took it out of a simple necessity. Callie believed him, and judging by his relaxed posture and attentive expression, so did Bolt. The wheelchair had been disassembled piece by piece, each component tagged with evidence markers and sealed in specialized bags. The entire unit now sat in secured storage behind Customs Inspection Room 4, its mundane exterior belying the sophisticated compartment discovered within its structure. The documents, because that's definitely what they were, had been carefully photographed, logged, and dispatched via secure courier to a federal office whose existence wasn't officially acknowledged on any airport directory. Callie knew better than to ask questions about that particular handoff. Some chains of custody were designed to remain opaque. Her current concern was focused on Walter Givens, who sat slumped in a cushioned chair in the corner of the waiting area. His initial shock had given way to a quieter, more profound distress. He clutched a paper cup of water between age-spotted hands, occasionally murmuring something about his daughter and Coral Gables, who would never believe any of this. Callie pulled a chair across from him, its metal legs scraping softly against the tile floor. She settled into it, leaning forward with her elbows resting on her knees, a posture deliberately less intimidating than standing over him. Bolt lay at her feet, his alertness undiminished, but his earlier tension now replaced with watchful calm. "Mr. Givens," she began, her voice pitched low and steady, "I need you to walk me through everything again. From the moment you arrived at the Lisbon airport until you landed here in Miami." Walter looked up, the overhead lights reflecting off his wire-rimmed glasses. "Why? I've already told them everything." A hint of frustration crept into his voice. "I believe you," Callie interrupted gently, raising a hand in a calming gesture. "But something doesn't add up. That wheelchair wasn't yours. The documents, hidden inside it, were placed there deliberately. You might have seen something, noticed something, without realizing it mattered." She leaned slightly closer, establishing eye contact. "Help me understand what happened, not as a suspect, but as a witness." The distinction seemed to register. Walter's shoulders relaxed fractionally, and he set the paper cup on the small table beside him. "All right." He took a deep breath, settling into the recollection. "I got to the Lisbon terminal around 6 in the morning. Red-eye flight, terrible sleep. You know how it is. Those seats are designed for people half my age and 2/3 my size." A wan smile flickered across his face. "My sciatica was killing me after standing through security. So I asked for a courtesy wheelchair. The airline staff pointed me toward them." "The staff," Callie prompted. "Tell me about them." "Young man, maybe 30, worked for the airline, not the airport. Had one of those vests with the company logo." Walter's forehead creased in concentration. "He didn't actually get me a chair, just waved toward a row of them near the gate and said, 'Take whichever is closest.' So I did." Callie jotted a note on her pad. "And the footrest, was it already down when you sat in the chair?" "I think so," Walter said, after a moment's reflection. "I don't remember adjusting it much. Just parked myself and waited for the boarding announcement." "This attendant, any distinctive features? Accent? Name tag?" Walter's eyes narrowed slightly as he reached back through his memory. He had buzzed hair, very short, almost military, spoke good English, but with an accent. Not Portuguese, though, something harder. Eastern European, maybe? His fingers tapped against his knee as he recalled the detail. Now that you mention it, he didn't have a name tag, just the vest. I remember thinking that was strange, since all the other staff had badges. Callie's pencil moved quickly, marking this detail for immediate follow-up. She was beginning to see the outline of something deliberate, a carefully planned transfer using an unwitting courier. The perfect setup, an elderly man traveling alone, requesting medical assistance. No suspicious behavior. No flagged passport. Nothing that would trigger enhanced screening. The invisible smuggle, hiding in plain sight. Did anyone approach you while you were waiting at the gate? She asked. Anyone who seemed particularly interested in you or your wheelchair? Walter blinked, a new memory surfacing. Actually, yes. A woman dropped her boarding pass near me. Bent down to pick it up, but I got it first, handed it back to her. She said thank you and smiled. That was all. She touched your bag? The wheelchair? Anything else? No, at least I don't think so. Walter looked uncertain now, the confidence in his recollection wavering. It happened quickly. I wasn't paying much attention. Callie nodded, the pieces assembling in her mind. This wasn't just about hidden documents. It was about methodology, precision. Someone had specifically chosen a passenger who wouldn't question slight weight differences in an unfamiliar chair, who wouldn't tinker with equipment not his own, and most importantly, who perfectly fit the profile of travelers who rarely get stopped. The irony wasn't lost on her. The plan might have worked flawlessly if not for Bolt, a dog's nose, an instinct honed through thousands of training hours, a moment of absolute stillness that had said clearer than words, something here is wrong. Mr. Givens, Callie said, setting her notepad aside, you're not in trouble, but we'll need to hold you a bit longer while we verify some details and complete our documentation. Walter nodded, resignation evident in the slump of his shoulders. I understand. His voice dropped, suddenly fragile. But please, call my daughter, Margaret Givens Wilson. She's expecting me for dinner tonight. She'll be worried. Callie offered a reassuring smile, genuine warmth replacing her professional demeanor. We'll take care of it. I promise. She stood, stretching discreetly to ease the tightness in her lower back from hours of tension. Bolt rose beside her, his movements fluid and graceful despite the long day. You know, she said softly to her partner as they stepped away from Walter, you just saved an innocent man from being framed for international espionage. Bolt looked up at her, his amber eyes holding hers for a moment, before he blinked slowly, what Callie had come to interpret as his version of acknowledgement. Then he turned his attention back to the corridor, ever watchful, ever alert, just another day at work for him, but one that had changed everything for Walter Givens. Officer Callie Navarro splashed cold water on her face at the customs break room sink. 20 hours into what should have been a 12-hour shift, fatigue was settling into her bones like an old friend. She studied her reflection in the spotted mirror. Outwardly, she looked composed, dark hair pulled back, uniform still crisp, but behind her eyes, thoughts raced, connecting details, seeking patterns. Bolt had never been wrong, not once in their partnership, not during the grueling canine specialty training in Georgia, where he'd outperformed dogs from agencies across 3 countries, not during their field certifications, where he'd found trace evidence that specialized equipment had missed entirely. His accuracy was legendary in the department. And his freeze response, that moment when he stopped cold and stared without barking, was his rarest, most definitive alert, reserved for situations of absolute certainty. Today, he'd frozen in front of a wheelchair, occupied by a man who turned out to be completely innocent. That part still bothered her. Not Bolt's behavior, but the setup that had nearly snared Walter Givens in something far beyond his understanding. Because that's what it had to be. A setup, carefully planned, expertly executed. She dried her hands on a rough paper towel and returned to the processing area, where Bolt sat attentively by the door, his ears tilted slightly at her approach, acknowledging her presence while his attention remained divided between her and the hallway beyond. Ever the professional, even after hours on duty, Callie ran her hand along his back, feeling the smooth warmth of his coat, before retrieving the file that had been delivered by a courier just minutes earlier. Inside was a preliminary assessment from the Federal Forensic Unit that had examined the documents found in the wheelchair. The report confirmed their suspicions with troubling details: no explosives, narcotics, or currency, nothing triggering standard alerts. Instead, technical schematics hidden between mundane paperwork, schematics showing airport cargo routes, customs inspection schedules, shift patterns for international freight at 3 ports: Lisbon, Barcelona, and, most concerning, New York's JFK. But the final item made Callie's throat tighten: an access badge, still sealed but clearly functional, with security markings indicating mid-level clearance for cargo areas. The lettering was Cyrillic, Russian, according to the brief translation note. "Why smuggle this?" she murmured, the question directed at no one and everyone. Her gaze drifted to the wheelchair, now secured behind evidence tape in the corner. Whoever had designed the compartment and placed the badge knew the risk of detection existed, but the potential payoff had outweighed it. If Bolt hadn't alerted on it, those documents would have moved across an entire ocean undetected into the hands of someone waiting in Miami, someone who now knew their package hadn't arrived. Her radio crackled, breaking her concentration. "Navarro, surveillance review is complete. You might want to see this." She headed upstairs to the security monitoring center, Bolt padding silently beside her, his nails clicking softly on the tile flooring of the back corridors. The small room was filled with the blue glow of multiple screens where Luca Rodriguez, a former NYPD officer with a talent for video analysis, hunched over a keyboard. "Got something?" Callie asked, taking the empty seat beside him. Luca nodded, his fingers tapping rapidly to cue up footage. International Surveillance Coordination pulled video from Lisbon's departure terminal. "Watch." The screen showed grainy but clear security footage of the gate area. Walter Givens sat alone in his wheelchair, positioned near a bank of windows, his bag resting in his lap as other travelers moved around him in the pre-boarding bustle. Luca pointed to a figure entering the frame. Male, short haircut, wearing what appeared to be an airline staff vest, carrying a clipboard. "This guy. Watch him carefully." Callie leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "That's not a real airline badge," she said immediately, recognizing the wrong color placement, a detail most passengers would never notice. "Exactly," Luca confirmed. "We ran it through database verification. The colors are reversed from authorized credentials, an old counter-surveillance trick. Now watch this next part." The man paused near Walter, glanced casually around the terminal, then crouched down as if checking something on the wheelchair. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, making a subtle adjustment to the footrest that would be invisible to anyone not specifically watching for it. 5 seconds, Callie noted, impressed despite herself by the speed and precision. "That's all it took." "Less than that," Luca corrected. 3.8 seconds to be exact. "And here's what makes it interesting. We matched his face against passport control records. This guy checked in for a flight to Madrid, passed through security, made the drop, and left. Never boarded any plane." Callie felt the pieces clicking into place, the pattern emerging with disturbing clarity. "So, they're not just smuggling things in," she said slowly. "They're using unwitting travelers as mules, bypassing security on both ends." Luca nodded grimly. "If your dog hadn't frozen on that wheelchair..." He didn't need to finish the thought. They both understood the implications. A passenger like Walter Givens, elderly, American, traveling alone, would likely have passed through Miami customs with minimal scrutiny. The documents would have been retrieved at his hotel, or his next transit point, by someone else in the network. Clean, efficient, and nearly impossible to trace. Callie's mind raced through the possibilities. An operation this sophisticated suggested resources beyond ordinary criminal enterprises. This had the hallmarks of something state-sponsored, intelligence gathering using civilian infrastructure as cover. And Bolt had caught it with nothing more than his nose and his training. She squeezed Luca's shoulder gratefully. "Send this to Ramirez and copy Federal Liaison. Flag it with the multi-agency alert code." As she headed back downstairs, a thought struck her that brought both pride and unease. How many other Walter Givenses had already passed through carrying secrets they never knew about? The command center hummed with controlled urgency. Representatives from 3 federal agencies crowded around displays showing airport schematics while communications specialists coordinated with international counterparts in hushed tones. Callie sat with her back against the wall, a foam cup of bitter coffee cooling in her hands. Bolt curled at her feet, but still alert. The senior officers had taken over now, men and women with clearance levels that allowed them access to intelligence networks Callie only vaguely knew existed. Walter Givens had finally been released, cleared of any involvement, and quietly escorted to a nearby hotel where his worried daughter waited. The Bureau had arranged a complimentary suite. Small compensation for the fear and confusion of the past 12 hours. There'd been no press release, no public statement, nothing that would alert whoever had orchestrated the smuggling attempt that their operation had been compromised. The documents and badge were now being analyzed by specialists in unmarked offices. Callie had no illusions about her role in what would follow. She and Bolt had intercepted something significant, but the investigation would proceed without them, buried in layers of classification and need-to-know barriers. And that was fine with her, because what mattered wasn't just the geopolitical implications. What mattered was that an innocent man had been spared involvement in something that could have destroyed his life. Walter Givens would go home to his daughter, would continue his retirement in peace, never fully understanding how close he'd come to something far darker. Callie glanced down at Bolt, who rested his muzzle on her boot, amber eyes half closed, but still tracking movement. Not quite asleep, never completely off duty, but relaxed now. "You know what bothers me most?" she asked softly. "They weren't even trying that hard to hide it." The compartment was well designed, but not impossible to find. They just calculated that no one would look closely at an elderly man using an airport wheelchair. She ran her fingers through the fur behind his ears, finding that perfect spot. His coat was soft now that the workday tension had eased. "But you looked," she murmured. "You always look." Bolt blinked slowly, as if to say he understood more than human language could express. "Everyone in there is focused on the big picture," she continued, nodding toward the conference room where officials still huddled around displays. "International smuggling networks, intelligence operations, counterterrorism implications." She sighed, fatigue seeping into her bones. "And that matters, I know it does. But you know what really mattered today?" She paused, watching a maintenance worker pass by, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies toward the main terminal. It was Walter, just one man who almost got tangled in something terrible. That's what matters most. You saved him from becoming collateral damage in someone else's game. A gust of artificially cooled air swept down the corridor as the HVAC system cycled on, bringing with it the distant sounds of announcements and travelers from the main concourse. Somewhere, a child laughed, the sound oddly comforting in the sterile environment of the customs offices. Callie drained the last of her now-cold coffee and stretched, her muscles protesting after hours of tension. "Come on, partner. Let's sign out and go home. They've got this covered now." Bolt stood slowly, stretching first his front legs, then his back in that graceful arch that reminded Callie of the big cats at the zoo. He shook himself once as if shedding the workday, then fell into perfect heel position beside her as they walked toward the exit. They passed 2 maintenance workers near the exit, nodding in acknowledgement. One glanced down at Bolt. "Hey there, hero," he said with a smile. Callie didn't explain that Bolt wouldn't consider himself a hero. That wasn't how dogs thought. To Bolt, he'd simply done what he'd been trained to do. Identify as something that didn't belong in the ordered world he understood. He hadn't leapt through flames or tackled a suspect. He hadn't gone viral or earned a medal. He'd simply paused, frozen in front of a wheelchair that contained something wrong, and in doing so changed how one man's story would end. They walked into the fading Miami afternoon, the sun hanging low over the parking structure. Tomorrow they'd return, walk another terminal, check another line of passengers, and Bolt would watch with those same patient eyes, waiting for something to feel just a little bit off. He wouldn't wear a medal, wouldn't appear in headlines. Most passengers would never know what he'd prevented, and that was exactly as it should be. because sometimes heroes didn't bark or bite or break through doors. Sometimes they just knew when something wasn't right and they stopped walking. Have you ever witnessed an animal sense something that humans completely missed? That sixth sense our four-legged companions possess has saved countless lives throughout history. From service dogs detecting seizures before they happen, to cats awakening families during house fires. What would you have done if a customs dog suddenly froze in front of a wheelchair? Would you have trusted the animal's instincts, even if it meant potentially embarrassing yourself or delaying an innocent traveler? Or would you have dismissed it as just a nervous canine? The bond between handlers and their working dogs represents one of the most extraordinary partnerships in law enforcement, where trust, training, and instinct combine to protect the public from threats most of us never even notice. And here's the real question. How many quiet heroes walk among us unnoticed because they don't make noise, just impact? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I read every single comment and love hearing your stories. If this video touched you, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. We share powerful canine stories like this every single day. Check out the 2 videos appearing on your screen now for more incredible tales of working dogs who changed lives forever. And I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another extraordinary story that will leave you speechless. Stay safe, and remember, sometimes the most important warning signs come not from technology, but from a wagging tail and watchful eyes.